After 7 long years, the wait is over. My name is Matt Squared, the owner of Squared Media, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a Minecraft animation. This is going to be an ongoing series, so we're not going to cover everything in just this video, but by the end of this one, you are going to know how to animate a character, how to build out a world, and how to import items and other objects into your world. If you guys want the best chance at success of finishing an animation, I highly recommend that you join the Squared Academy Discord, which I've just created, link in the description, where you can ask all of your questions after this tutorial and post your creations with people who are also learning. And right before we get started, I just want to take a quick look at what one of our trial directors at Squared Media, who's about to become a director, is working on. Outline is working on an animation called Wild Chase, and this is some of the OpenGL draft that he sent in just last week. And I wanted to give you guys this as a reference for where you'll be at the end of this video. So that's what you should expect. There's going to be more to come in future videos with lighting and compositing and rendering and video editing. But for this one, that's what we're going to focus on. Also, a quick thing, I just want to say I apologize for the mic popping in the tutorial. That's not something I was aware of as I was recording it. So in the next one, hopefully it should be fixed. Alright, so in order to make a Minecraft animation, the first thing we're going to need is an animation software. And for that, we need to go to blender.org. And you're just going to scroll down. Right now we're on 5.0, whatever version in the future is fine. And just click download Blender and click on where it says download right here. It's just going to download that right to your files. And once you have it downloaded, I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to do that again. Once you have it downloaded, just go to your files, double click the program, and it should take you to a screen that looks something like this. And this is the Blender default startup file. And I know when I first started using Blender as a first-time user, my thought was, I have no idea what's going on. This is super overwhelming. I'm never going to learn all this stuff. And to a degree, 8 years later, I don't know everything about Blender still. But the one thing that I've learned about Blender is that it's almost like mathematics in school, where you look at a really complex problem with like 2x squared plus 5, whatever, and when you're 5 years old, you look at that and you're like, I'm never going to learn how to do that. But over time, you learn addition, you learn multiplication, you start to wrap your head around little concepts, just bit by bit at a time, and slowly you gain understanding up to the point where maybe you don't understand everything, but at least you're comfortable with it and you recognize kind of the steps that you would need to take to get where you want to go. And with Blender, there's just way too many things to be a master at all of them, so you really have to pick the things that you want to learn and just do those really, really well. So I'm going to stop yapping, I'm going to start teaching you guys some stuff. The first thing that we need to do is we need to go to Edit and go to our Preferences, because there's a couple things that we need to change right off the bat. So first of all, if we go to our system, we're going to be using cycles for our render engine, and we want to be using either CUDA or Optics. And in this case, I like to use CUDA. Optics works fine, typically is a little bit faster, but I've also noticed some issues with rendering motion blur on previous versions. I'm not sure if that's true for 5.0. I haven't used 5.0 for very long, but I typically use CUDA. And if you have both a GPU and a CPU, I've found that if you add your CPU, it's a little bit faster, but oftentimes just having your GPU works just fine. So even though there's this option, I'd recommend having CUDA as well as just your GPU selected. Optics also works fine too. If you want to do more research into that, you're welcome to, but this is just what I'm recommending for the tutorial. So the other thing that we need to do is we need to go to our key map, because there's a couple of key things that, see what I did there? Anyway, so that was unintentional. Anyways, so there's a couple of key things that we need to change before we can get started. So, and I don't like to dump a bunch of hotkeys on you guys. These are just a couple of really simple things that are essential for when we're just getting started, so that way we can develop good habits early. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change from left click select to right click select. Now people compete on which one of these two is better. Doesn't really matter. I've been around since the Blender 2.7x days, so I grew up on right click select. We didn't have left click select back in the day, so I'm a boomer by Blender standards. We're going with right click select. But there's a couple other things that we need to change as far as the key bindings go that are just as important for our animation. And one of those, we're going to type in Shift, and then we're going to have the little uptick mark. And you can also search by this by instead going to Name and looking for View, Navigation, Walk, Fly. And instead of having it be Shift and this little uptick mark, we're going to click on the hotkey binding and we're going to go Shift F. And again, this is just something that I grew up with on Blender 2.7x. I also think that's a little bit easier to reach, so that's why I stay with that. And the other thing that we need to do is, I'll search by this by name, is type in frame, and this is going to be how we jump one keyframe at a time. So normally you hold down Alt and you use your scroll wheel. You can alternatively use your left and your right arrows. One thing that I've found is instead of having my left arrow, I click on that and I set it to Q, and I have my right arrow and I click on that and I set it to E. Make sure you hit Save Preferences, because otherwise when you close it, you'll have to do it all again. But what that's doing is, let me expand my timeline a little bit here. If I press E or Q, it's moving my timeline along just a little bit. And what that lets me do is say if I have, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit here, see if I've made an animation. So I have this going along here, and I wanted to preview it frame by frame. I could Alt and use my scroll wheel, or if I wanted to go one frame at a time with precision and not move my hand off of WASD, I can just press Q and E, and that moves it along one frame at a time. Really nice for previewing. And that's it as far as key setups go. So I'm just going to stop with that for now, and we're going to get into making our Minecraft animation. So the next thing that we need in order to make a Minecraft animation, now that we've got all of our hotkeys and stuff set up, is a character. And in order to get a character, you're going to need to download what I have in the description for you, which is the Squared Media Pro Rig, as we like to call it. And it's on version 1.4.12. We don't have it on the Blender Marketplace yet, but we're working on getting it there. And once we get it there, you'll be able to click, drag and drop it into your Blender scene, and it'll automatically give you any of the latest updates. But until we have that functionality, I need you guys to download that from the description. And once you have that downloaded to your files, you can simply pull that up. You can drag and drop that into your Blender scene. And then when it says install from disk, you're going to hit OK. And from there, if you press the letter N on your keyboard, and if you ever have a hard time hearing me, I have screencast keys enabled in the bottom left of my screen, so that way you can see exactly what I'm pressing at all times. And that'll bring up this side menu here. Another useful hotkey for you guys, so N is we're gonna be using N a lot to bring up the side menu here. The other thing is T, and that'll knock out, either add or knock out these tools on the side here. So we can actually press T right now, because we're not gonna be using those very much. And we're gonna press N, and as you can see here, click to refresh, and you should have the Squared Media Pro Rig V1 ready to go. And we've made this super duper simple for you guys. All you have to do to get the rig in your scene is click Import Rig. And there you go. So in order to get a good angle on this rig, we can either hold down our middle mouse button, and if you're using Blender, I would highly recommend that you use a mouse, because it's going to be a lot easier to navigate that way. But you're going to hold down your middle mouse button, and you can rotate around. Or what I like to do is I like to press Shift F, and you get kind of a camera view. So pressing W, A, S, and D lets you move around side to side. Pressing Q and E lets you move up and down. Holding down Shift lets you move faster. And the tricky one that I didn't learn for a couple of years actually was, if you're moving and you scroll up, it'll change the default velocity of your camera as you're moving around. And if you scroll down on your scroll wheel while you're in this free fly mode, it'll decrease the velocity. So that way you can just get whatever speed you want. You have a lot of flexibility over your viewport. And this is how I'm going to be flying around for most of the tutorial, is I just really like using Shift F all the time to look around, whether you're in the camera or whether you're out of it. So now we've got our character in the scene, but it doesn't really look like a Minecraft character that we'd want to use. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click the cube, hit X, delete the cube. We don't want that in there. We'll be adding more cubes of our own later. Second of all, this character is completely white, and that's because we are in what's called solid mode. And solid mode is all the different modes that you have are up here, and there's 4 of them. The first one being wireframe, we're almost never going to use that. Second being solid, the third being material, and here you can see we actually do have some materials on this, and fourth being rendered. And the one that we're going to focus on right now, and primarily for this tutorial, are solid and material mode. So if I ever say switch between solid or material mode, that's going to be this thing up here. And some people will have this where they've right-clicked it, and they've flipped this whole header to the bottom, like that, flip the bottom. So some people have it down here. If your Blender has it down here, that's where you can find it. I typically have it up on the top, so that's where I'm going to be working with it. But we're going to start out in solid mode, and each of these modes has a little drop-down box where we can pick some different options on how we want to view it. And in this case, I want to see the texture while in solid mode, so I'm going to click on the texture box. There's lots of other cool things you can do here if you want backface culling, if you don't want an outline or any of this stuff. That's all stuff you can play around with, but all we really want is texture. All right, so now that we're looking at our texture, it's probably a good time to go ahead and give our Minecraft character a skin. And in order to do that, we're actually not going to click on the little material thing here. That's how it was in the old Minecraft rig, but we're going to click on the rig itself, because everything that we're going to do to the rig is baked into the UI. And that way we can just access all of it from one simple place, all right here. And this is how we're going to customize our Minecraft rig. At this point, you're free to go and start making animations. In order to do that, you just go to pose mode and you can start moving stuff around. We're going to get to that in a little bit. I want to show you guys how to set up your character first, and then we'll get into animation. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to click on this button here and find yourself a skin. So in this case, I'm going to pull up my Craft My Life matte skin, and you'll notice that it only has one layer right now. It doesn't have the 3D effect. And that's because we have the second layer visibility turned off. We can turn that on simply by clicking these buttons right here. Make sure render is always on, and viewport is just an optimization thing. But oftentimes, if it's not covering up the eyes, like if I have a more humanoid character and not one that has a big cover over my face, I typically like to keep viewport on as well, just so I can get a more accurate representation of what my character is going to look like. After that, if you have slim arms, just click this button. Like we tried to make this as easy as possible for you guys to work with. Subsurface scattering is something that we're going to get to in a later episode. This has to deal with how the character responds to lighting in the scene, but that's a little bit more advanced, so we're going to touch on that later. As far as the face configurator, everything here from now on, just straight down, the face configurator, face and eye settings, all this stuff, this is all stuff that you guys can just play around with and figure out yourself. All of it should be pretty self-explanatory. We made it very simple to follow. You can change your face height, you can change your eye height, you can change your eyebrow height. Yeah, so you just have all these different options. I like to go with about 1.5 for my eye heights usually. Eyebrow offset usually about 1.5 as well to be in line with the eyes. And from there you can decide if you want your character to have teeth. In this case, this is what the teeth look like. It's just a couple of white boxes. A bunch of stylistic stuff that you guys can do with this rig. Same with the eyes. So in order to see the eyes, we actually want to go over to material mode. And you can see by default, we actually have all kinds of color going on. And this is the Craft My Lifestyle. And that's what we were developing this rig for. So in order to get rid of this, if you want to have completely flat eyes, you can get rid of the reflection and you can change all the colors to the same thing just by clicking and dragging if you want to do it that way. So now you have the basic squared media eyes. But if you want to have more texture to your eyes, maybe you just want to have the flat eyes with the reflection, this is probably how I'll be handling the hightail animation using this rig. You can do that. If you want a little bit more customization, you can do like half or whatever you want to do. And there's even an option that we give you guys for a that's not the gradient. There is a gradient option somewhere in here. That's the glow. So okay, that's emission. We do have a gradient option at some point. I think it's in the advanced eye settings. Yep, there it is. Okay. So the iris gradient. So as you can see, you can play around with a bunch of this stuff, get all kinds of really cool looks. It actually looks really cool. I might keep it like that. So you just get whatever look you want for the eyes, for the face, the eyebrows, you know, you can move them in and out. You can make them thicker and thinner up to a certain point. But we have all the customization that you guys could possibly want on this character rig. So enjoy that, explore that, just spend some time with it. There's all kinds of goodies to unpack there. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the rig part. So within the UI, we have it set up to where this skin section, you should have to do all of this once, maybe twice, but generally once you get a character set up, you're going to be living in the rig section. And this is where a lot of the functions of the rig are. So if you want to like track the eyes, we have an eye tracker baked in. If you want to move that around, I typically keep that off because I like having the hand animation control instead of it being based on a point in space. We have IK and FK arms for those of you who don't know what that is, and assuming that you don't if you're watching this tutorial for the first time, FK basically means that I'm going to move the arm by the joints, and IK means that I'm going to move the arm by this little cube. And the advantages of FK are that it follows the character around a lot better. So like with IK, I'm going to drag my character and it's not going to follow it. But if I move it around, it's going to stay in one place. So if I'm putting my arm on like a desk or something, I'm going to have my character be an FK, and I'm going to move that to stay there, because that's just going to save myself a lot of time animating instead of trying to adjust every time I have a character lean forward in animation. But otherwise, most of the time I have it be FK, because if I'm moving around, it's going to follow the character. By default, the feet are IK because that helps them stick to the ground better, and typically when you're moving, you use the root, so those are going to follow along. But that's a very quick, full of jargon way of explaining just a very simple function of either keeping the arm attached or having the hand of the arm stuck in one place. So I understand that can be a little bit confusing to start with. Again, I want to encourage you guys just to play around with all these features, get used to them. This is something you're going to be spending a lot of time with, so you're going to need to get familiar with them anyways. And yeah, some other stuff here is we have what we call inherit rotation, and this is just going to determine how your head works. So if like my head inherit rotation is turned off, I can move the body around and the head stays still. Same with the torso. If I have the torso inherit rotation on, it's going to act differently than if I don't. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these settings one by one as I've been doing just for the sake of time. But yeah, you guys get the idea. The last thing that I'll touch on is the roundness settings. And this basically just takes the edge off of the character itself when it gets rendered. This is something that we're going to focus a little bit more on, and again, a later episode when we're talking about lighting and rendering. But for now, you can leave that be. You're mostly going to be messing with the IK arms and a couple of the other things. So that's it for now as far as the rig. There's a couple other things if you want to explore in the functions, like if you want to do motion capture, we have motion capture functionality, a bunch of stuff that you guys can explore. And I'll be making a separate video as well about just all the features of this rig in a lot of depth, because we spent about 9 months on this thing, and it is the craziest rig that we've ever made. Several $1,000s went into developing this thing, made absolutely free for you guys to use. So, with that all being said, you should have a basic idea of how to use the Squared Media rig now, the new one anyways, and I want to cover the basics of animation. And if you jump to this point in the tutorial, based off the little timestamps in the video, this is where it's going to get good, because this is where we're going to learn how to move our character, how to actually make an animation, and it's actually a whole lot simpler than you might think. So in order to make an animation, we need to use something called keyframes. And basically what keyframes do are they save a pose at one point in time, then you move forward in time, you change your character to another pose, you keyframe it there, and the computer fills in the gaps between each of those frames. In 2D animation, typically how it's done is you draw 2 key poses, and then you have a in-between artist draw all of the in-between frames, and then all of them are stitched together, and it plays in one motion, and you play frame, 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 frame. With the computer, with 3D animation, you can set one pose, and I'll go ahead and do that here for you guys, and set another pose somewhere else, and it does all of that in-betweening for you. And that's the beauty of 3D animation, is that if you know how to work a program, it actually saves you a lot of work and does a lot of the work for you. So it's pretty cool stuff. It's definitely a lot to take in at one time, but if you guys sit with it, if you just take your time with it, if you enjoy it, most importantly of all, you're going to do fine, and you're going to become a master animator if that's what you so desire, because I'm going to give you guys the resources for it. So what I want to do now is I want to just have a simple animation in mind, something for our character to do. And the first thing that comes to mind just off the top of my head is having my character wave at the camera. So how am I going to go about doing that, and how am I going to go about making that look good? Well, the first thing that I need to do is, instead of being in object mode, which is the default mode of the character, I need to go to pose mode. And again, I don't like dumping a lot of hotkeys on you guys, but this is one that you're going to be using a whole lot, and that is going to be Control Tab. And that's going to swap you between object and pose mode. And sometimes you'll get stuck in like edit mode or something if you're hitting Control Tab and then you have some other stuff happening, all this stuff blowing up. Just go up here and manually change it back to object mode and it'll fix itself. So we're going to be living in pose mode for a little bit, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit about how each of the members of the body works on the character. Because again, we've meticulously designed some of these things to be of the utmost convenience to the user. So what we've done differently from our previous rig is that we've separated the shoulders from the arms for the express purpose of you cannot press G to grab and move the arm around on this bone. That's entirely handled here, so you don't have keyframes overlaid on the same body part. We've also added bendy wrists, so that's something that's really cool. We love our bendy wrists here. That's probably been the most requested feature of the previous rig, so we finally did that. I think it looks fantastic. Finn did a great job. And apart from that, every single other bone is pretty self-explanatory. There's like the mid-range bone, there's the torso, there's the feet that move, there's the head, there's the eyes. And how I'm moving these things around is I'm just clicking on something with right click and I'm pressing R. And what that does is it rotates around in a certain direction. There's a couple ways you can use the rotate button, or the rotate tool. If you press R and then X, Y, or Z, then I just pressed X, Z, and Y, I don't know. It's been a long day. But you can press X, Y, or Z, and it snaps it to an axis, and you're able to rotate along that axis. But what I use more often than not with basically every single motion I make is pressing R twice. And that opens up kind of a free-form rotation. I know some people don't really like that. I've always animated like that, where I like use R, and then RR, and then R, and then RR, just to kind of adjust my pose however I like it. So I'm pretty much always using R or RR. I'm not really snapping to any X, Y, or Z's. That's just a personal preference. You guys can figure out how you like to move the body around the most. As far as moving around things that are in IK, what you want to do there is press G. And that is the translocate button, where you're actually grabbing something and you're moving it around in space. Or say translate, that's the word for it. When you're translating something in 3D space in Blender, you press G. If you want to snap it to an axis, you can do the same thing. Z, up and down, X, side to side along the red, and Y, forward and back. So with G and R and right clicking, you're able to pose your character however you'd like. And one final thing I'll say too is that when you want to deselect everything, you're going to press A. So if you press A, it selects everything. If you press it once, if you press it twice really fast, it deselects everything. So if I'm like selecting a bone and then I'm like, oh, I want to go and I want to edit something in the world, AA, Control Tab, I'm back in object mode. I can go over here now and I can start messing with my cube in my world. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to go silent for probably about 60 seconds, and I'm just going to animate this guy waving his hand. Oh, and one last thing before I do that, I'm going to show you guys how to reset a pose. If you have something selected and you press Alt, G, and R, that'll reset the location and the rotation to its default position. So if I wanted to do that for the whole rig, I'd press A, select all of it, Alt G, Alt R, and I've got it all back to where I wanted it to be at the start. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a quick animation. I'm going to set my timeline. I'll move this over a little bit so you guys can see my timeline better. I'm going to set that to maybe frame 90, and we're going to change my render engine to cycles, change it to GPU compute, and we're going to also set our frame rates in the scene. We're going to go to our output properties to 30 FPS. Every single squared media animation that you see is in 30 FPS, except for Axolotl War, which was in 24. But typically, historically, we've used 30. If you look at major other franchises like The Amazing Digital Circus, they also use 30, I believe. So 30 is what we're going to roll with. Generally a good YouTube frame rate for YouTube animation. It's a little bit more clean, or a little bit more slick than 24 without having the gamey look of 60 and without having so many keyframes for you to comb through that it takes forever to render. So 30 is a happy medium, and we've been using that for years and years. So we're just going to use 30. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to animate our little friends waving. And I lied about the going silent part because there's just too much to teach you guys as I'm going through this process that I'm remembering on the fly as I'm doing it. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to set keyframes for my character. And in order to do that, I need to press I. That sets a keyframe at a position in time. I can move along my timeline either by clicking and dragging, by pressing Q and E. Typically I click and drag to where I want, or I can press spacebar to start and stop the timeline, and this will play it through in real time. So oftentimes when I want to see how long an action is going to take, or kind of estimate in my mind how long an action is going to take, I press the spacebar, I let it play for a little bit, and then I stop it after like a millisecond, and I say, all right, that's about how long I want my wave to take. That's how I get my animation started. So in this case, I want him to lift up his arm, probably over the course of 22 frames. Lift that up there. The other thing that I want to do is, this is another thing that we can do, is snapping to keyframes here. And in order to jump from keyframe to keyframe, after I've set this second pose, instead of having to navigate all the way back to frame 1 and find that precisely, or go back to some other keyframe, what I can do is I can press the up and the down arrow, and that'll snap me to the nearest keyframe. So we're going to be using that a lot as we're jumping between poses. So say I want to go back to my starting pose, press the up arrow, and I want to set another one for the torso. So that way I can have him lean over when I get to frame 22, kind of lean into his wave. But as you're noticing, I'm pressing I a lot. I make a movement, I press I, make a movement, I press I. There's a better way of doing this, as there is with almost everything in Blender. So if you see this little open dot right here called auto keying, we're going to turn that on. And after we've turned on the auto keyframe, the other thing that I want to go ahead and just introduce to you guys is changing from play every frame to frame dropping. Because if you have a really laggy scene, you've got a ton of characters in your scene, and you have it on play every frame, you're going to be watching your animation in slow motion, and that's not going to be accurate to what your final product's going to look like. And the first animation that I ever made, I was running on a potato. I was working from my family laptop, and I had it set to play every frame. And I was watching through my animation frame by frame and going like, oh yeah, this motion looks fine. And then I rendered the whole thing out, and it was way too fast. So we want to change this from play every frame to frame dropping as we're going to play through our animation. So from here, all I'm going to do is just kind of think about how I want my character to move in this wave. And the best way to do it is to do the action yourself. You look at Disney animators and they're doing this for their movies still. You look at Sony animators and they're still doing this for their movies. Whenever you want to animate a character, just do the motion yourself. So I note, and you'll notice things that you don't even notice when you're trying to think about it. So I'm on camera right now, so I can just look over at myself. And I'm noticing that when I go to wave, I lean over and I have like a 2 or 3, maybe a couple times, motions with my hand that kind of stop at a 90-degree angle, and then I put my hand down. So with that in mind, I'm going to actually delete all this. We're going to just start fresh. Alt-G, Alt-R. Oh, the other thing too, when you have auto keyframe on, every single move that you make is going to set a keyframe. So be very careful about that, because you can set keyframes that you don't mean to set. So anyways, we're going to go here and we're going to start making our animation. I'm going to be moving probably these 5 bones, maybe my head. So I'll set a keyframe on 1. When I lean over, I notice that my lean starts before my hand starts to raise. So I'm going to start my lean first, and then maybe on like frame 5, I'll start to have my hand come up. I think what I want is I want the wrist to be snappier. Right now it looks like jelly, so we're going to make those motions faster. And now we're going to get into keyframe editing. And there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either do this straight from the timeline, or you can jump into the animation tab. And the animation tab is a great way to look at all the individual keyframes on your scene. So here we have to go back to solid mode, change that to texture to take a look at this. And here we're going to get what's called the dope sheet. The other thing I like to have is the graph editor. So normally it gives you a side perspective of a 3D viewport up here. What I like to do is click on this thing here, editor type, and I like to look for graph editor. And this right here, as an animator, is where you will be spending a lot of your time. In order to crunch down this graph, because right now it's got all kinds of crazy curves, if you hold down Control and then hold down your middle mouse button, you can stretch and shrink this graph as much or as little as you'd like. And I generally try to get this in a position where I can understand everything that's going on. And I make this large enough to see what I'm working with here. So here I see like the wrist controls. I got the wrist selected so I can see all the wrist controllers. And all these here are breakdowns of the axes that your individual motions are happening on. So say if I were to rotate the wrists, let's go over to a future frame, and I were to rotate the wrists this way, you'll notice that the X, Y, and the Z all changed locations and they all set a new keyframe. But if I were to R and then press X, actually, that's a bad example because it's on a tilt, so it's going to set them on all of them anyways. But you'll notice that certain ones didn't move very much because I didn't move it very much along the Y-axis. So that moved just a little bit, the X moved a little bit more, but the Z, since I crunched it this way down on the Z, that shot way up here. So this is a breakdown of how each of the curves works with each of the directions of the motion happening in your scene. And this is a lot at first. I know it's going to be confusing. Again, this is something that I want you guys just to play around with, get familiar with, and quite frankly, watch some other YouTube tutorials on. There's plenty of good resources out there that I learned from. I'm going to be linking some in the description on how to work with this. Specifically when it comes to animation, there's one guy that I really like called Alex on Story, I believe, and I'll be linking his animation tutorials in the description below. And he just has phenomenal hour-long courses on 3 different workflows for animation, being straight ahead, pose to pose, and there's a third one, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, but some kind of like intermixed one. So, and those are all great. Those will all teach you how to use these curves really well, really effectively. But this is where we can get a lot of the refinement for our motions. Now, I'm going to do things quick and dirty. I'm going to head back to our layout tab, and I'm just going to mess around with the keyframes themselves to try to get as accurate of a result as I can to begin with. I'm just going to work with the keyframes on my timeline. So, what am I noticing? Right now, there's a couple things that feel stiff. I'm noticing that there's not kind of a resting motion on the hips as they finish. I'm going to add a little bit there. I want a little bit of motion on my head. The other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure all of my keyframes are selected here. As you can see, they're really adding up a lot on my timeline, which is why it's important to have individual pieces selected when you're working with them, because when you have them all selected, it's a whole mess. And I want to press T and make sure they are Bezier. And that's going to make sure that all of them have these nice curves, as you see here. They're set to linear. For instance, I'm going to select these two and set them to linear. It makes them really sharp, really unnatural, and we don't want that. So make sure that you have all your keyframes set to Bezier as you're working with them. And whatever animation you guys are going to do, just play around with the keyframes. Just experiment. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you wanted to have your character slide from one place to another and have them like dive off a cliff, you know, and do some crazy stuff that way, go for it. Let your imagination run wild. I don't care what you guys make for your first animation. Just make something. All right, I think we're getting pretty close here. And normally you'd want all the parts of the body moving all throughout everything, so it doesn't feel stiff. And another reason why it feels stiff again is just facial expressions. So I'm going to keyframe the eyebrows a little bit. For the eyebrow controller, as is the case with a lot of these controllers, if you select it, there's a couple functions baked into each of them, where if you press G and then you press S, you're able to get different scaling options, different looks to them. With the eyes themselves, there's actually a feature baked in to where they respond a little bit to them moving around. So you get to cheat a little bit with their shapes. They automatically look a little more lively than by default. So maybe we'll have them look away and then look at the camera. And eye motions are usually pretty fast, so we'll have that. Maybe we'll add in a little blink. Which those are usually only 2 or 3 frames down, 2 or 3 frames up. Let's make that a little bit faster. And those same tools that I've shown you guys with the scale, the rotate, the grab, you can use those anywhere in the software. So like here, I'm selecting these keyframes with B to box select, and I'm pressing S, and they'll scale around the point that my timeline's on. So I selected this first one here, and they're scaling relative to that first keyframe. So play around with that. I'm going to say that a lot this tutorial. Play around with it. Just try everything. That's going to be the best way you're going to learn. I'm just here to introduce you to these concepts so that way you can take them and run, ask all kinds of questions, you know, put stuff in the community chat and the Discord about what you're experimenting with and just figure out the software, you know? That's what it's all about. I think when I was first starting out, I spent about 2 months where every single day after high school, I'd come down and I just sit in Blender and I just try stuff for an hour or two. All right. I think I'm pretty happy with that. And it's not perfect. And again, this is not a tutorial to teach you on how to get perfect on animation. It's how to teach you how to animate and get you guys familiar with it. So we're about 40 minutes into the video now. We've made our first little animation, and hopefully you guys, if you're following along, you've messed around with Blender a little bit by now. You've messed around with this character rig. You've made your little 2 or 3 second animation. If that's somebody falling back and dying on the ground, that one probably would have been a lot funnier had I thought of that. Just having him fall back on the ground, dying, you know, face going out like, oh, that would have been funny. I turned off auto keyframe there, so that way when I go back, it doesn't save any of that. Oopsies. Looks like I did not keyframe the eyes properly. There we go. But yeah, again, do whatever you want with the animation. And now that we've gotten animation in, the next thing that we want with our remaining 15 minutes or so of the video is to actually get a world for him to be in. And as you guys saw an outlines example at the very beginning of the video, as a trial director or as somebody making animation, really the only 2 things that you need to know how to do is how to animate a character and set up a world. And these last 15 minutes, we're going to focus on setting up a world. So in order to do that, first thing we're going to need to do here is we're going to Control Tab, go back to object mode. We're going to get onto a nice frame where he's looking all nice. And we're going to File, Save As, and I should have told you guys to do this at the very beginning, but name your file whatever you want. I'm going to call it Tutorial Animation. The other thing I want you guys to do every single time, and I mean every single time you save a blend file, is make sure that under the external data, under File, Resources, Automatically Packed Resources is checked. If you do not do this, if you do not pack your resources, when you send your scene to somebody, it will be completely pink. It will not have the textures. You will have to resend it with the resources packed. So in your startup file, make sure that you always have this, always have this checked. I make jokes about this all the time. People still do it in Squared Media all the time, where they'll be like, Matt, can you check out my scene file? I'll be like, yeah, sure, send it over. Let me take a look. The whole thing's pink. So make sure that this is checked all the time. Before you go, before you send off something, before you save, after you save, when you're eating dinner, you know, when you wake up at night, when you're dreaming, be dreaming about automatically packing the resources. Always do this. I should be seeing no issues about pink scenes in the Discord. Got it? What are we going to do? We're going to automatically pack the resources. All right. Thank you guys for coming to my TED Talk. Now we're going to learn how to import a Minecraft scene into Blender. So With all that being said, we've learned how to animate our character. We've learned a lot about just some little systems in Blender. We're starting to build our knowledge. We've learned how to do 2 + 2, and we learned how 2 × 3 works. Now we're going to learn the other side of it. We're going to learn some division and some subtraction here, to use my math analogy again. It's going to work together with everything that we've done so far. So we want to make a nice, pretty background for our character to wave on, because right now, if we were to press Shift A and make a camera and press numpad 0, press numpad 0 to snap to that camera and press Shift F to fly around and get a good shot on our character. That's pretty not interesting, in my opinion. We want a cool background, like you saw in the tutorial thumbnail. So in order to do that, there's 2 ways you can go about that. And one of them is if you have Minecraft, go ahead and boot it up. All right, and once you've got Minecraft booted up, go to a single player world, turn it to creative, call it whatever you want. I'm just gonna call this tutorial. And then you're gonna create your new world. Once you spawn in, fly around, build something, find an area that you really, really like. And once you do that, what I would recommend, oh, here's a village, perfect. So, oh, and a village with some trees in the background. That's really cool. All right, so once you do that, then you're just going to simply save and quit the title. That's all you needed to do, was just generate the world, build something, find whatever you wanted. And then we're going to go to a website called JMC2OBJ, JMC2OBJ. And from there, we're going to click download the latest release. That's going to bring us to the GitHub page. And we're going to click on JMC2OBJ-whatever it is .jar. And then we're going to go to our file exploder after that. And we're going to double click on the jar file that we downloaded. And from here, we're going to navigate to the folder where our Minecraft world is saved. And what JMC2OBJ does, since I kind of quickly skipped over that, is that it basically takes your Minecraft world, it converts it into an object, and then that object you can then import into Blender. And then we're going to be using another program called MC Prep to prep all of the materials immediately so it looks like a Minecraft world. So in order to find the directory where it's at, I often like to type in %appdata% on my computer, open up that file folder, and I notice that, and I go to .minecraft, and that gives me my hierarchy of where I need to go. So I'm going to click on the ... button here, and here it's saying I need to go to my PC, my local disk, users, whatever user I am, app data, roaming, .minecraft, and I need to go to my saves folder. And I just click on whatever my world was called, in this case it's called tutorial, and I click on choose world folder. And then I click load. And ta-da! You can see from a top-down view what everything looks like. So here's where I spawned in, that little red X. There should be, or sorry, green X. Little red X is where I logged off, I believe. And this shows you the world that I explored. You'll only be able to import things that you rendered out. So if you had a build, you'll be able to see that from here. I'm moving around by holding down my right mouse button, scroll wheel to scroll in and out. And if I want to select a region of the world, I hold down my left mouse button and I click and drag to make a red box. Now in this case, I was interested in getting the village as well as the forest behind it. So I'm going to make a little red box around just about this. And the thing about JMC is that whenever you're getting a world to import, you don't want it to be super duper big, because when you have it be absolutely massive, your scene takes forever to load, you're not able to optimize it well, your scene runs super slow, that affects everything that you've got going on, it makes the render times longer, there's just a lot of downsides. So you want to be as lean as possible with this, and you want to make your world size as small as possible. So once you've got your region selected that you want to export, simply hit export, and you can just make sure that all of the boxes are ticked and all the settings are what you see here on mine. I don't know if I changed any of those, but you basically want to just make sure that optimize mesh is checked. And once I make sure I have all of that good to go, I'm going to hit export. I'm going to find a file that I want. This is my world files folder that I have. You can go to your documents and make a new one if you'd like. I'm just going to call this tutorial world. And just save it off there as whatever you would like. I'm going to call this Wave World, because this is where Matt's going to be waving in. And we're going to select Export Destination. It'll generate the OBJ. And while we're doing that, actually this one is going pretty fast because it's a small world, another reason why to have it small. We're going to go over to a site called MC Prep. So just look up mcprep.com or just type in MC Prep. Go to the first thing from the duck cow and you'll find this site. Go down to download MC Prep, click on that. I think that should go ahead and start your install. Yep, it does. And same as we did before with the character rig, we're just going to drag and drop MC Prep into our file, or into our blend file. And now if we press N, we do not have MC Prep because we need to go to Edit, Preferences, go to our add-ons, look up MC Prep, and make sure we click the checkbox that enables it. And now, if we press N, we should have MC Prep on the side here. Perfect. So, now that we've got our world OBJ done and exported, and we've got MC Prep, what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Import, OBJ. We're going to find our tutorial world, and we're going to import our OBJ. And you got to make sure that the MTL is next to it as well. If you don't have the MTL next to it, MC Prep will not be able to work with it. So to set up the texture, so make sure that these two files are together. JMC will automatically do that, so you don't have to worry about it. Just make sure that if you're moving this from one file to another, you're not just moving OBJ and you're moving the MTL as well. So we're going to double click on that and give it a moment. Aha! I was going to say, we may have to look around where it is because it'll spawn it relative to where the world spawn is. And if you're not able to see it, you might need to change your clipping distance. And you can do that by pressing in, going to View, and changing your clip end to like 100,000. And then if you look around, you'll find your world somewhere. So now we're going to talk about optimizations a little bit because this world is super messy. One thing I'll add retroactively about the JMC stuff is that if you want to, you can change your floor and your ceiling, which is the minimum render height and the maximum render height of your world. I could have changed this to like 50. I'm looking for things turning black. Okay, some of that turned black. Maybe I don't want 50. Maybe we would go 40. Okay, you can see here how it's kind of taking a vertical or a horizontal slice out of it, maybe 30. And we get most of that. I think that would probably have been good. And what that would have done is it would have chopped it off at the midline here and left less for me to optimize. But it's okay. You can do it either way. We're going to be cleaning it up in Blender anyways. So in order to not have this be an absolute mess of a world, which is honestly kind of cool to see all the cave systems underneath, but we don't want that because optimization reasonings. We want to right click on the world, and the first thing we want to do is we want to go over to MC Prep, go to JMC to OBJ, and click Prep Materials. Hit OK, and it should be ready to go for you. Now all the textures look like they do in Minecraft. All this should be good to go, and you are a happy camper. But you're not a happy camper yet with how much this is lagging your scene. So in order to clear out all of this junk below, and this is something that I wish I would have learned from the very start of when I started animating, because in the old tutorial series, none of this was covered. And it's really, really basic too. So what you got to do is you got to hit Tab to go into edit mode, which you can also do by going right here. And what you want is to turn on this thing here, and that's called X-ray, toggle X-ray. And that lets you select through all the vertices instead of only the ones that are facing you. Make sure you're in vertex mode and make sure X-ray is turned on. And then you're going to press align yourself with roughly where the floor of the world is. Then you're going to press B, move your cursor a little bit below the floor, box select all this stuff here, X, delete vertices, come out of X-ray mode, press Tab, and now you don't have all that junk. In order to move around blocks, what you're going to do is pretty much the same thing. Click on your world, press Tab. Instead of being in vertex mode, what you want is face mode. And you're able to select faces and move them around. But you'll notice that when I'm moving around this face, it's stuck to all these other faces. If I want to detach this face, I'm going to press a hotkey P, and that's going to separate my selection. I'm going to go into object mode to select that, and now I can move this face independently. If I want to undo it, I can just Control Z, or if I have two objects and I want to join them together, I select the object I want to join first, and the object I want to join it to second, and the one that I'm joining it to will always be highlighted in yellow, and the first one selected will always be orange, and I will press Control J to join them together. And that's the basics for how to edit a world. You could apply this with anything. I'm going to give you guys a couple more examples real quick. I want to extend out the sugarcane. As I can see, it's just a couple planes. I'm going to select both of them by holding down Shift and right click. In this case, I want to duplicate them. So I'm going to Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to hold down Control to snap it to the grid. If I want to do this for two things at once, I can hold down Shift, select them, Shift D, hold down Control, snap them to the grid, or if I wanted to snap them to an axis like we learned earlier, I can press Z, hold down Control, snap them to the grid, and I can just expand this up as high or as low as I would like. Alright, say I want to make this rock wall or this sandstone wall here a little bit taller, but problem is JMC optimizes everything, so all these blocks are one giant face instead of individual ones. Well, this is where a handy tool called a loop cut comes in, and you can do that by pressing Control R. Hover over the area you want to loop cut, you can see a yellow line appears. Scroll up on your mouse wheel until you've got one loop cut at every single block. Click, hit escape, go to your face mode, and then you're able to select faces from individual blocks. I'll do it over here too, just so you guys can see. Control R, scroll up twice. I see that's at the block area, or the area where the blocks line up. Hit escape. Now I can select these faces and do whatever I want. Shift D if I want, hold down Control to move that up. Now you know how to edit your world. And typically when I'm editing my Minecraft world, I like to be in face select mode because that's the easiest. And when I hit X on something, I want to delete faces, not vertices, because if I delete vertices, it's going to delete the vertices and everything those vertices are attached to. Versus if I hit X and just delete face, it's only going to delete that face. So I'm going to hit Tab to get out. I'm going to Control Z that first. Actually, I'm going to Control Shift Z to redo that. And I'm going to show you guys if there's something like this and I couldn't get it back. Shift D this one over here, hold down Control, slide it over, voila. So you can do some building retroactively in your blend scene, even if you've got it all imported, so that way you don't have to re-import everything and hassle with all of that. So that's how to mess with your world. And what I want to do now is I want to bring this over to my character. So just like we've learned before, I'm going to have my world selected. I'm going to press G. I'm going to drag it over to my character, pressing numpad 0 to snap to my camera view. And I'm going to put this wherever I want to. I can also press R in order to rotate the world. And I'm going to press RZ to keep it rotating along its axis. So that way it's not rotating all weird like this. Now, as you can see here, when I'm rotating, it's rotating about this point that's way off to the side. If I want it to rotate about itself, I'm going to go to Object, and then I'm going to Set Origin. And then what I like to do is, if you have your 3D cursor set somewhere, which you can set by clicking with your left mouse button, you can set it to that. What I always like to do is set it to the center of mass, or origin to geometry. So now it rotates about its center point, or roughly so. So that helps me to rotate it a little bit easier, helps me to position it better. And now that I see that Matt is there, I'm going to place him probably within the village somewhere. Let's not have him be in some water. And there we go. Now at this point, we have it roughly where we want it. And from here, we would just adjust where Matt is standing himself. So what we can do is then we can move him maybe to the edge of the pier. And there we go. We've got our character moved around, we've edited our world, we've done everything that we need to as far as editing blocks and doing all that stuff. We have him in space, and now he's playing an animation in a set. It's that easy. So the animation part is definitely much harder to understand. I know I threw a lot of terms at you guys really, really fast, a lot of hotkeys at you guys really fast as I was messing with the world, but that's all stuff that just watch the video over a couple of times, practice them, get familiar with them, and using those hotkeys and getting familiar with those hotkeys is really going to speed up your process of animation, and it's really going to be worth it in the long run, because at first you're going to be like, oh, how do I fly around again with the camera? Shift F. Okay, I got that. How do I move up and down? Nope, not W, E. And eventually it gets to the point where it's second nature and you're flying around and you're editing things really fast and you're jumping into edit mode. So just practice, practice, practice. And you'll be doing all of it a lot as you're working on stuff anyways. So it's not like something that you're going to be learning for a super niche purpose that you're going to use maybe once or twice. This is going to be your all the time when you're working with Blender. So very, very important to learn. All right, so to wrap up this video, I have one last thing to teach you guys, and that is how to append assets. So Minecraft has all kinds of blocks and things and tools and armor sets, and we use them all the time in our animations. Pretty much every single one of those assets, except for ones that we make ourselves, come from what we call the BSS rig. And what you want is, I believe it is the nari3d.com/Boxscape. BSS stands for Boxscape Studios. And we want 6.5. So we click download now. And this one's a really big download, so it may take you guys a couple of seconds. But once we've got that in our file exploder, then we can hit extract all, extract, and then we're able to access it through our files. So in order to append things from the BSS rig, actually let me open up the BSS rig itself just to show you guys what all is in there. So I am actually going to extract this for myself. Even though I've done it before, I just don't want to go digging for it. And we'll take a look at the options that we have to import into our scene. So in order to go into here, we just double click on this, and you can see all these different blend files, things like textures and all that. What we're going to be appending from are these blend files here, the Minecraft blocks rig, the Minecraft item rig. So we'll open that one, and we'll open the item rig. And you'll probably be using some mobs as well. So let's go ahead and open up the mob rig. And you can explore more of these on your own if you'd like. But just to show you what we're getting into here, it's going to take a minute to load because these are really big files. This is what's included in the Boxscape Studios rig. All the Minecraft blocks, or not all, but most of the Minecraft blocks that are all separate entities that you can just import into your scene as is, and you can play around with them and mess around with them and do whatever you'd like. So for instance, say I would want to have a door in my scene, but you notice that this door here is baked into the world. What I'd want to do is I'd want to go into edit mode, delete those faces, go back into object mode, have my cursor where I want it to be, go to File, Append, let's go to the BSS rig, and a door is a block, so I'd want to look for the Minecraft blocks rig, and then I want to go to Object and type in not for door, and then I can find whatever door I want. In this case, I want an acacia door. Double click, Shift S, selection to cursor, and now I have my acacia door. And all of that is stored in these files here. So whatever you're looking for, whether it's an item, whether it's a block, whether it's a mob, and a lot of these mob rigs are very, very simple, but they get the job done, especially if you want something for a background. Say the Guardian, you know, if you need a Guardian, you go into here, you can take him into pose mode, you can move around the bones. I think this one here controls the... Oh, that one there. Okay, so this is set up with FK. And then that controls the tail. And like you can animate with this. That's perfectly fine. You don't need anything too crazy for that. So the BSS rig is going to be your best friend. It's going to have everything that you need. And just for the sake of it, let's go ahead and think of something to give Matt. Maybe he's waving with a shovel in his hand since he's in the sandy area. File, Append, You guys can figure this out on your own. Great. We can click the parent directory button here just to go up a couple of ticks to get to the blend file that we want to. A shovel is an item, so we're going to look up item. We're going to go to the item rig, go to object, and then we're going to look for a shovel. We'll give him an iron shovel. We're going to Shift S, selection to cursor, and now we've given him a shovel. If we play this animation back, you'll notice that the shovel does not stick in his hand. The way we can fix that is by something called parenting. So if we select our shovel, and then we hold down Shift and select Matte, we then need to go into pose mode because we want to attach this to one of the things in his pose. And this little crosshair here on the front of his hand, this is expressly for parenting objects too. So we can click on this. So we have our shovel in orange. We have this selected here. We're going to Control P, and we're going to set this to bone relative. So now whenever we move this bone, I can move the shovel while in pose mode, and it follows him. Although the only problem now is that our shovel is hitting him in the head. So if I don't want a concussion, I probably need to animate this shovel a little bit, which I can do by, again, just selecting it. I want to be in object mode, though, because it's an object. Hitting I, going to where it's going to concuss me, maybe flipping it back a little bit. Maybe he adjusts it in his hand. Pressing I, or maybe just changing how he's holding it altogether, so I don't have to deal with any movement. That looks a little bit silly, so maybe I'll just have it be more up like this. And if I wanted to turn on auto keyframe, again, I'd press this button, and any move I made with the shovel would be saved. But if I just want 1 or 2 keyframes, all I'm going to do is press I and save that keyframe. And there we go. Maybe I can have it like fall down in his hand a little bit. I don't know, just for the sake of animation. Ooh, that actually looks kind of fun, him like tossing it up. Maybe I'll make it him toss it up just for the sake of doing something fun with the animation. There we go, look at that. And just out of nowhere, sometimes you get ideas as you're animating for stuff that you didn't even think that you were going to make to begin with. A little bit more to the center. And he throws up a shovel, catches it, waves at you. And somewhere along the way, we lost our arm animation. And there we go. So this is getting to about an hour long now. I think this is where I'm going to go ahead and end the first video. You guys should know everything you need to know about how to animate a character, or at least getting started to animating your character, setting up your worlds, importing items, building out your worlds, optimizing your worlds, separating out objects. And that actually reminds me, there's one last thing I need to teach you guys before I end this video about separating objects. If you want to select all of a similar type of an object, you are going to want to press edit mode, be in that mode, select an object that you want, and you're going to want to press Shift G and select similar material. And that will select all of the similar material in the world. This is especially useful for if you want to optimize leaves. So you can select a leaf, Shift G, select all that, press P, separate by selection, and now you can grab all of your leaves as one object. And say if you wanted to hide them, you could come over here, find them over here, call them leaves, hide them, and you've optimized your world that much more. And you can turn them on whenever you want them back. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this one here. Again, I want to keep these tutorials a little more casual, a little more lecture-like, where I'm just kind of explaining my thought process and going through things as I find them to be natural, as I do them for my job. Hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, ask them in the Discord. As this tutorial series goes on, I'm going to be molding this around what you guys want to see. Next tutorial, I'm definitely going to focus on lighting and a little bit more about compositing and materials and things like that, which I think is the next logical step, because after this, typically I'm looking to, after I've made my animation, after I've set up my world, I'm typically looking to start seeing how that looks in a final render, or at least a vertical slice of that, where how does one frame look, so I can get an idea of how the entire scene is going to look. So I think that's going to be the next logical step. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here, and I will see you guys next time.